How's everybody doing? Now I gotta try to figure out this mic because I hear it's either too loud or too quiet. If I talk like this, is this all right? Okay. And if I even touch it, it's loud. All right, we're gonna have fun with this today. Let me just say, Kirk, great seeing you. Thanks for being here. To all the candidates, thank you for being here. I frankly wish Bruce was still here. I wanted to make a quick mention of the fact that for those of you that have seen the commercials running against your congressman, Aaron Schock, when you spend $1 million against somebody in your own party, that's just as good, frankly, as when the Democrats spend a couple $1 million a little bit later. I wish Bruce was here to hear that because I believe that there is some financial help that he has been giving to that. And I wish that was something that would stop. Look, in a primary, and I've been involved in them, and I've been involved in a real tough one recently. It's not easy. And you know what? Honestly, it does get negative, and that's fine. That's part of the political system. But I think at the end of the day, and I know the governor candidates in this room, I know at least Mr. Dillard's left, they understand that the big picture is we're a party that has to unite. We're a party that has to come together. And we have to ensure that we're not going to have another stinking Democrat run in Springfield at the governor's race. So let me ask you all a question. By the way, I want to say first off, I did an event yesterday for Kyle. That's why I'm wearing my Kyle sticker too. He is an outstanding candidate. I mean, this is absolutely the man that you guys need to represent you as the mayor of Quincy. Absolutely. And we talk about building that next generation of leaders. Kyle is going to be that next generation of leader. You know what? He's probably been underestimated. As a young guy, you've probably been underestimated at every step. In fact, I remember you telling me that when you ran for city council, basically people kind of pat you on the head and said, "Go get him, kiddo, but good luck, you're not going to do this." In my career, I've beat 3 incumbents in my career, once on the county board and twice now in Congress. Each time, everybody said I couldn't do it. People underestimate the young folks out there. But let me tell you, it's going to be the youth in this country that's going to save our party. And it's going to be somebody like Kyle Moore coming forward and taking leadership in Quincy to really turn your city into the kind of productive engine that youth, when they graduate high school, want to stay here in Quincy. When they get done with college, they look at how to get back to Quincy, not how to get to someplace else. And he can bring that kind of leadership. So please, let me just say this before I get to the root of what I wanted to say. If you haven't helped Kyle yet, please do. Please write a check. And not because we're up here being, always grubbing for money and trying to get all this big bank account, but because it's frustrating as both a member of Congress, as a city councilman running for mayor, when you go out and shake hands, and you've done this since August, which you've been doing, going door to door since August, and sometimes you meet people and they say, "I have no idea who you are. What do you believe? What do you stand for?" And he's been working for 6 months to get that message out, because frankly, it's the financial backing that is what really gets that message out. So thank you for those that have been involved. Those that haven't, please take a look inside and see if there's something you can help them with, because this would be a phenomenal thing for your city. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you feel a little dark and dreary right now? A little kind of, boy, we got our backside kicked in November and I'm just beat down, I'm sad, I'm upset. Be honest, raise your hand if you kind of feel that way. I felt that way. After November, it took me about a couple months to really start to, I guess, have positive feelings again, if that makes sense. What I want to do, though, very quickly, is talk about why we lost in November. Now, I could stand up and just give you a whole bunch of things that make you clap and cheer, and I can throw out a bunch of lines, about Barack Obama and everything else, but I'm not going to do that to you. Because this year is a time when we as a party, I think, have to come together and figure out how to be a national party again. So let me just share something with you. In all of the post-election analysis, we've been beat over the head. Some of you have seen this. They talk about the demographics issue we have. They talk about the issue with youth. Youth are still voting for President Obama in a big way. And they talk about, the fact that can we ever win a presidential race again? But if you actually look at the post-election numbers, you know what you're going to find out? 35 to 38, something like that, % of Americans call themselves Republicans. They self-identify as Republicans, which means about 65% of America either calls themselves Democrats or something else. And you know what those people see when they see the Republicans? They see a bunch of angry people. They see a bunch of people that like to go on Fox News and scream and yell about how terrible everything is, about how bad it is, about how bad this president is. Some people even question his status here in the United States. And people get on the news and they scream. And you know what? That makes us, as Republicans, when we hear somebody screaming on TV, it makes us feel good because they're saying exactly what we're feeling. The country is $16.5 trillion in debt. If we don't get dead serious about spending in this country, we are going to swallow up in red, and we are going to find that we're spending more money in interest on our debt than we are on national defense, and we're going to have to continue to cut the core services of government. Every person in here is responsible for about $60,000 the federal government if the bill was called due today. 8% of our neighbors don't have jobs, and they want jobs. It's even higher than that want a better job. You know, when I came out of college in 2000, I had more job offers than I knew what to do with. Not because I'm awesome, because I'm not, but because the economy was so good. You guys agree with that? But the 65% of Americans, when they want to hear us talk, they don't want to hear us scream and yell. How many of you all saw that doctor, I think Ben Carson, when he spoke, right? You know why he was so effective? Because he was calm. He didn't scream. He laid out a very matter-of-fact argument, and people reacted in a big way. When we don't yell, when we smile, when we lay out the issues, but we do it in a way that doesn't make the rest of the country think that we're trying to exclude them, we'll win. You know, something that I'm a little afraid of too is the new definition of conservatism in this country. The new definition of conservatism in this country is not what do you actually believe. It's become who's louder and who's angrier. I've actually had people come up to me and say, you need to be more angry when you're on national television because that's how you get your message out. You smile too much. I've literally had people say this. Really? As a party, we have to look inside. Because I believe the Republican Party is the last line of defense between European socialism and the vision of that man on the back wall, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan had this vision of America that was so powerful that it compelled generations of people who didn't even know what conservatism was. It compelled young people. It compelled demographics that we don't win today to our side because he talked about what that vision was. Look, we have a spending problem in this country. But how about instead of going on TV and screaming about how bad everybody is, we go on television and say, you know what? Because I believe we can live in a country that can do better than this. I believe we can live in a country that doesn't have to accept next generational indebtedness. I believe we can live in a country where we are going to leave our kids a country better off than the one we inherited, as every previous generation has done. In 1980, Ronald Reagan, you know, the economy was terrible. Huge unemployment. Many of you in this room remember. I don't. I expected tomatoes to come in there. But Jimmy Carter was presiding over huge unemployment, double-digit inflation, interest rates in the double digits. I mean, that's almost on. I just bought a house. I couldn't imagine having interest rates in the double digits, but that was what our country was dealing with. Ronald Reagan comes onto the scene. He had lost the presidential race prior. Now he comes on the scene, and he has two options. He can either talk about how terrible Jimmy Carter is and about the malaise days, and boy, this country is just in the tubes and we're never going to come back from it. But Ronald Reagan didn't do that. Ronald Reagan, in his brilliant ability to speak and communicate a message, Ronald Reagan came out and he said, I believe America can be a shining city on the hill. I believe in our DNA, we are the country that's going to lead the world. You know, at the time, when we're dealing with a hollowed out military, which, by the way, sequester will do to our military today, I just want to say that, and I can address that later. But when we talk about a hollowed out military, a terrible economy, America that doesn't feel that special pride of America, and Ronald Reagan comes out and says, we can beat the Soviet Union. I mean, that's incredible. And the American people said, it's that level of optimism I want to believe in and I want to buy into. And amazingly, in 1980, Ronald Reagan beats Jimmy Carter. He becomes president. He maintains that optimism. And you know the great thing about optimism? It's self-fulfilling. Because the shining city on the hill that in 1980 he painted a picture of for America was the country that existed when he left office in 1988. Now we look at the demographic problem. We look at Hispanics. We look at African Americans. And we can easily say those are groups we're just never going to win again. But why is it that the youth and Hispanics voted conservatively a number of years ago, but they don't today? Because my theory, and this is just a theory alone, take it or leave it, I believe that the last great person to explain the conservative message was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was able to say, here's what a conservative is. And keep in mind, this is something that may not be foreign to us in this room, but to the entire world, the idea of conservatism is very foreign. And it's foreign because everybody sees the world through big government. Russians see it through big government. Even Eastern Europeans, some of the biggest champions of freedom, grew up in a system of big government. Hispanics grew up in a system of big government, where government is a big key. And Ronald Reagan was able to come out and say, look, here's the deal. We want a government that provides roads and bridges that can kill our enemies anytime, anywhere around the globe, that creates a free and fair environment for the free market to flourish, preserves the family. We charge whatever taxes we need to fund that. We have a social safety net that provides food, but not a way of life. That provides people the opportunity to eat, but not an excuse for not working. We see what the tax rates need to be, we charge them, we get out of your way, and we let you go about your life. And people reacted to that. And that sense of optimism. So now as we as a party look in and say, okay, how are we going to actually come back? Let me beg you to do one thing. Let's change our conversation from who's not a Republican to who is. So many times I hear people talk, how many of you have heard the term rhino before? Don't raise your hand, but think about, just answer this rhetorically. How many of you have used the term rhino in describing somebody? Do you really think that helps us? Now I get it. I get that sometimes we're not selling out our values as a party. Absolutely not. But if somebody's with us 80% of the time, as Ronald Reagan said, shouldn't they be our friend? Because if we don't accept them, guess what? The Democrats will. You have pro-life and pro-choice Democrats. You have pro-Second Amendment and anti-Second Amendment Democrats. And they're crushing us nationally. Look, I'm a conservative. Somebody less conservative than me, but still believes in a small government and fiscally conservative ideals, I personally welcome them to my party. Somebody even more to the right than me, I consider them part of my party. So instead of talking about how to make our party smaller and who to exclude, how about we all realize, look, there's only two parties that represent 400 million Americans. We can either be the minority party or we can be the majority party. And if we keep talking about who doesn't belong to us, I'm guaranteeing you, and that's what we're doing now, by the way, we're going to stay in the minority status. And we can rock on our porches in 20 years and tell our grandkids, or 30 years, tell our grandkids that, well, yeah, the country sure went to hell, but guess what? I voted no for everything. Or guess what? I held the purity test in the Republican Party to say somebody varied on me on one issue, and I told them they didn't belong. So I did that. I can look at myself in the mirror. Or we can say, you know what? Everybody's welcome as long as you believe in some core principles with us. You may not always agree with me, but I'd rather have somebody, what's the old saying? I'd rather have somebody on the inside of the tent urinating out than outside urinating in. It's a different word, but I cleaned that one up. It's Sunday. You guys are a good Catholic community, and I think we'll get run out of here. But let's look at ourselves in that, please. That's the only thing I'm going to ask and beg of you, because we are the last line of defense against the extinction, I believe, of freedom and the extinction of the American dream. Every one of us in here represent a generation, but I'm going to call us right now the current generation. You know, Ronald Reagan said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. You know what that means? If you believe that, which I do, that means that freedom is never more than us in this room, our decision away from extinction. Now I know it's a bad feeling out there. I know you can walk out of here with your head down, but let me tell you why America is so great. My grandfather in World War II stared down the Nazis on the battlefield. In fact, it bothered him so much that he could never talk about it. And it was 2003, as he was basically a year away from passing away. I remember we were at Thanksgiving dinner. Actually, it was 2002, Thanksgiving dinner. And I finally got my grandfather to agree to talk to me about his experience in World War II. And as he started to talk, he froze and he bawled. Now, as a young man, seeing your grandfather cry is a very humbling experience. And he cried because the secrets that he had seen and he had locked up inside still 50 years later consumed him. But he was part of the greatest generation of Americans, many of who gave their lives, but all of who gave something to make America what it is today. I like to think back to the founding father, or to the men who signed the Declaration of Independence. And I believe every one of them meant that it was the end of their life. Every one of them. But I believe they also thought that they were starting something that maybe in 50 or 100 years would come to fruition, but their life was worth this potential gain. And as you know, we ended up winning. By the way, half of the colonialists were loyal to the crown in the first place. We ended up winning, and we became an independent nation. And you think of the Civil War, all the wars in between, World War I, II, Vietnam, Korea. By the way, you Korean and Vietnam veterans in here, if there are any, you guys have a special place in my heart. In Korea, it's called the Forgotten War, but it's not forgotten in your memory. And in Vietnam, you had a nation that did not treat you as you should have been treated. And so you have my admiration. You think of... You think of Desert Storm, you think of the wars my generation is fighting today. And the next generation. I'm an old guy in the military now, by the way. You think of those. And that moment comes to us. You and I inherited hundreds of years of blood, sweat, and toil to make America what it is today, to people that have handed off a dream that they'll never experience because they gave their life on the battlefield to protect it. You and I don't have the right to give up now. You and I don't have the American right. This is not in the Constitution. You don't have the right to give up. We have got to keep fighting for the America that we believe in, the America that we think can exist again, the shining city on a hill that Reagan talked about and then brought about. We can do that again. But my message to you is look around the room. Some people in here you'd call establishment. Some people in here you'd call Tea Party. Some people in here you'd call moderates. By the way, everybody in here I call my friend, because you're in the fight to preserve America with me. Let's quit. Because this fight is so important that we've got to win it. And I know when I was although I wasn't a ground soldier, I flew in the air, but had I been a ground soldier, and had I had 50 men in my couple of platoons, and I realized that some of them maybe didn't look or act like I wanted them to, trust me, in the middle of combat, I wouldn't shed any of them. I wouldn't get rid of any of those rifles. I'd try to get more people. I'd try to bring them all in. I'd try to make my tent bigger. Not sell out my principles, but tell people that their principles, guess what, are our principles. The majority of Americans are conservative. They just don't necessarily know it yet. And then they look at people that call themselves conservative, and we're saying some crazy things on national TV, and they say, boy, I sure don't want to be part of that. And let me say one more thing, too, on this. I want to read, because you all hear it all the time, the Gettysburg Address. You hear this probably pretty often. I don't know if you've ever actually listened to the words. So I was doing a Lincoln Day dinner, true story, about a year or two ago in LaSalle County, Illinois. And they had the Gettysburg Address actually printed on a program. And I flipped it over, and the familiar words, the 7 years ago, and I actually started to really look at it and read it. It is the most powerful speech uttered by any president of the United States, I think, ever. So I want you to hear it. And I want you to hear it in the context of thinking about when I talk about defending our country. And I talk about defending the values and the liberty that we believe in. I'm going to skip the first part, the fourscore part. Now we're engaged in a great civil war. We're testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and dedicated can long endure. We're met on a great battlefield of that war. Keep in mind, they're standing on this battlefield, death and destruction everywhere. We've come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It's altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work for which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It's rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a birth of new freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Imagine a president standing on a field where as many men were lost as lost in the entire Vietnam War in a few days. Everybody's looking at him for something. You're in the middle of the most dark time in American history. And he stands up firm and proud. A man worn by ages and stress. He stands up and he utters those words. That these dead shall not have died in vain. I share one more story. I shared this at the fundraiser yesterday. So Morris, Illinois is a small town near where I live. I represent it. And a young man was getting his second Purple Heart. And I had the honor of giving that to him. His first Purple Heart, he was injured in Iraq, went to Germany, went back to Iraq, was injured again. That was the injury that sent him home. And for which the Purple Heart I was giving him was for. By the way, this was a year ago or so, or maybe give or take a half year. In the time he had been home, And then the time I was giving him his Purple Heart, he had had 8 heart attacks. 8. Now the guy was my age exactly. He had a wife, he had 2 daughters. So imagine his position. Injured twice in Iraq, you have a wife, you have a daughter, the military has discharged you, they're giving you your paycheck, but they said, you're too injured, we can't use you now. And I pulled him aside before this press event and I said, hey, what's going through your mind? We compared notes about, where were you at in Iraq? I was here, what years and all that. And I finally said to him, I go, hey, let me ask you a question. What's going through your mind? Because I'll tell you, and this is true, every day I actually miss being there. I really do. And it's something that if you've never been to war, you can never understand, and I can't explain, but I miss it. So I wanted to see if he felt the same way, and he did. And he said, Congressman, I actually called the Army, and I told them that they could have all my medals, all my ribbons, they can have all my retirement, all my disability. I'll even sign on the dotted line that they owe me nothing if they just let me go back for a year. If they would just let me go back for a year. Now why did he say that? 2 reasons. Number 1, his brothers and sisters were still there and he missed them. The other thing is he felt like he hadn't given enough to his country yet. You're not going to find that in China, ladies and gentlemen. You're not going to find that in the Chinese military. You're not going to find it in the Russian military. But you will find it in the United States of America. As you still see 18-year-olds every day that were 9 years old, no, actually 7 years old when 9/11 happened, that still raise their right hand, sign on the dotted line to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they barely know the country because they're so young. But they know it needs defended. Well, what I'm calling you to do today is nothing compared to what young men and women do to defend our country. On our own way, I am calling you to step up and defend what we believe to be the America that is the shining city on the hill that we can have again. So as you walk out of there, watch what you say. I'll ask this just kindly, and I say this to myself. Are you spending more time bashing other Republicans? Or are you spending more time talking about what the Republican Party is going to do for the country? Are you spending more time determining whether somebody is pure enough for your ideology? Or are you going to spend more time figuring out how to bring more people in to believe in our ideology, even if they're not with us on 100% of the issues? You can be upset. There's probably a couple people in here that are upset about what I said today. That doesn't bother me anymore. Because I think we need leaders in this party who are going to stand up and tell you how we're going to take this country back again. Because I've seen people give so much, I don't think we have the right to give up on her today. With that, I want to say thank you for the honor to come and talk to you. I want to say thank you for the support that you give to your great candidates and to your soon-to-be mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all the hard work you've done and everybody that has been involved in putting this together. And for all of you, have a great week and God bless you. And God bless our great church.